A miso jam hucklebuck snaps in slow motion. The goo oozes freeze frame. Audience faces spool backward until revulsion flips into delight. Under jaundiced office light, two neon signs, Barney's and Bernie's, blink like erratic ECG lines, reality and memory short-circuited. Police strobes rake a Victorian mansion. The moment Maria's gun pops Verity's skull, the screen blacks out. Re-illumination reveals Maria in a gilt cloak as a roaring crowd hails their empress. 3 slices, 1 breath. Welcome to Black Mirror's most shameless yet elegant act of reality hacking. Maria, a rising star at a trendy snack company, is about to launch a daring new flavor, miso caramel. Everything's on track until her old classmate Verity shows up as the newest intern. That's when reality starts to shift. Tiny things at first, logos, documents, names, then bigger things. By the time Maria notices what's happening, Verity's already rewritten the script of her life, and no one else remembers the original. This isn't just a revenge story. This episode wields its premise like a scalpel, cutting into a much deeper fear. In the age of algorithm-driven reality, deepfakes and glitching memories, who decides what's true? And what happens when someone else holds the pen that writes your past? There's also a lingering rumor, a digital ghost that won't die. Some viewers swear they saw a different version. The fried chicken chain spelled one way for them, another way for everyone else. Alternate endings. Alternate realities. So here's the real question. Did Verity ever die? Or did she do exactly what she said? Wait for you to blink, then give you the version of the story you most wanted to believe? Long before Bête Noire ever aired, Charlie Brooker already knew the story had to hurt. In interviews leading up to Season 7, Brooker described a nagging fear that modern reality itself was becoming less sticky. He wasn't just talking about AI or fake news, but something more slippery, the idea that memory, once personal and private, was now up for public editing. The inspiration. A bizarre cocktail of Mandela effect Reddit threads, corporate rebranding cases, and a real-life incident where Brooker misremembered the spelling of Looney Tunes on his daughter's lunchbox. This obsession took root years earlier in the Black Mirror writer's room. Several abandoned scripts toyed with similar ideas, one about a consensus virus infecting Wikipedia, another about influencers quietly changing their childhood photos. None quite clicked until Brooker read a speculative tech blog about quantum consensus architecture. The phrase gave him chills. It sounded like a horror movie masquerading as science. The title itself, French for Black Beast, was chosen to evoke both the shadow of trauma and the thing we'd rather not remember. Originally, the script was even darker. Maria was a disgraced journalist, and Verity a surviving cult member whose followers could vote to change reality via a decentralized app. But Netflix pushed back, worried the blockchain satire would date the story too quickly. Brooker agreed, then pivoted. He ditched crypto jargon and made it personal. Office drama. Female rivalry. Tech is quiet sorcery. The horror would unfold in beige cubicles and passive-aggressive Slack messages. Sienna Kelly, best known for adult material and Hidden Run, wasn't the first choice. Brooker originally pursued Gugu Mbatha-Raw for the role of Maria, but ultimately felt her face carried too much inbuilt sympathy. Kelly's blend of warmth and threat fit better. As Brooker put it, you have to believe she's both a star employee and the kind of girl who carved insults into a locker in Year 9. Rosie McEwen, meanwhile, had just wrapped Blue Jean, a queer period drama about shame and surveillance. She brought an eerie stillness to Verity, playing her like someone who's already rehearsed every scene in her opponent's life. On set, McEwen and Kelly barely spoke outside of filming. Director Toby Haynes encouraged it, calling their energy coiled and combustible. One example, the chicken shop logo scene. Originally, the VFX team created both Barney's and Bernie's signs with subtle flicker overlays. But in final edit, the flickers were dialed up after test audiences missed the glitch. Haynes made the bold call to reshoot the whole sequence, this time using practical signage and projection mapping instead of CGI. That's why the scene feels so tactile. It was burned into the set, not added in post. A scrapped ending where Maria wins. She finds a way to hijack Verity's quantum compiler and begins editing a new world where she's always been the hero. Brooker cut it because, in his words, if you let the bully become the architect, the whole thing curdles into nihilism. I'd rather leave her screaming in a world she no longer understands. Bête Noire became the final episode written for Season 7, but the second to be shot. By then, Brooker had a fully modular writing setup. He kept multiple endings, multiple edits, even multiple title cards in circulation. One internal cut was labeled Mandela Prime. Another simply read, "You do not remember this." In a show built on broken futures, Bête Noire stands out not because it predicts what might come, but because it whispers something worse. Maybe it's already here. Maybe you've already forgotten the original version. Maybe that's the point. If Bête Noire has a superpower, it's this. It convinces you you're still watching reality, just long enough to make its violation feel personal. Director Toby Haynes uses one of the most subtle forms of gaslighting available to a filmmaker, the betrayal of shot repetition. Key scenes are shown, then reshown, with almost invisible changes. Signage shifts, wordings alter, a background color softens from mustard to off-white. You feel like something's changed, but you can't quite say what. That uncertainty isn't a glitch. It's the point. Take the break room sequence in Dita Headquarters. The first time we see the Employee of the Month wall, Maria's face is second from the top, next to a golden placard. The third time, just 2 scenes later, it's Verity's subtly laminated, with Maria nowhere in sight. No one mentions it. No music stinger. The camera simply floats by like nothing happened. The only clue is the way Maria hesitates by the fridge. Even more unsettling is Haynes' use of symmetry. In Black Mirror, symmetry often signals illusion. USS Callister, White Christmas, and here it frames identity as something engineered. Notice how the workplace scenes are shot almost exclusively in centered compositions, flat, sterile, perfectly balanced. Everyone seems to be performing, but when Maria starts to unravel, the shots begin to tilt. Dutch angles, sudden handheld. The camera shakes when she doesn't. It's like the lens itself stops believing her. Color grading reinforces this descent. The first act of the episode is awash in warm neutrals, vanilla, cream, caramel. Corporate calm. By the time we reach Verity's apartment, the palette shifts into deep navy and LED glints. A cold, programmable world. It's not just aesthetic, it signals power transfer. Maria's dominance dissolves into Verity's domain. In early scenes, Verity wears clothes with no visible branding, but if you look closely, you'll notice something odd. The labels change between appearances. Her jacket is Zara, then COS, then something unidentifiable. It's the fashion equivalent of a disappearing ink signature. According to the costume department, this wasn't accidental. Her wardrobe was curated to suggest adaptive camouflage. In short, Verity doesn't wear style, she wears consensus. Compare that to Maria, whose outfits are aggressively curated. Her signature outfit, blush blazer, asymmetrical earrings, Dita lab coat with Hucklebuck logo, suggests someone desperate to be the face of something bigger than herself. That desperation becomes the wound Verity exploits. Rosie McEwen's Verity barely raises her voice. She never pleads, never insists. She just lets Maria spiral. In a pivotal scene where Maria accuses Verity of changing the chicken shop sign, Verity responds with a line that could have been written by a psychotherapist or a cult leader. Maybe you saw what you needed to see. It's a masterstroke of disarmament. The phrase implies empathy, but delivers erasure. It undermines both the accusation and the accuser. Sienna Kelly plays the role like a woman trying to fight gravity. Her breathing becomes erratic. Her fingers tremble when they think no one's watching. In one haunting beat, she tries to take a photo of the sign, but the picture comes out blank. She checks her phone, confused. Then again, and again. We never see the photo. We only see her face. And that's the final magic trick. Bête Noire understands that psychological horror doesn't need monsters. All it needs is for someone to say, "That never happened," and for you to start doubting yourself. In the end, the episode isn't asking whether Verity is right or wrong. It's asking something far more dangerous. If everyone believes a lie, but you, does that make you crazy? Or just obsolete? At its core, Bête Noire is a case study in narrative disorientation. But not the kind that shouts twist. It's the quieter, more insidious kind that rearranges the furniture of your mind without asking. Let's break that down. Most viewers assume the episode follows a standard 3-act arc. Normalcy destabilized, Mandela effects creep in. Power shift, Verity confronts Maria. Collapse, reality breaks, chaos ensues. But that's only the surface. What Bête Noire actually deploys is a recursive loop, an iterated simulation of credibility loss. Each time Maria tries to prove something, the script does something cruel. It shows the audience how much she's already forgotten. Key example, the scene where Maria rewatches security footage of Verity entering her office uninvited. The footage clearly shows Maria inviting her in. What's more sinister is that Maria herself hesitates. She almost believes it. The camera lingers on her expression not with empathy, but with skepticism. As if the show itself is wondering, are you sure she didn't? Brooker borrows this mechanism from memory science. In cognitive psychology, source misattribution refers to when we remember the fact but forget where it came from. The script uses this principle not as a plot point, but as a structural virus, making us mistrust every callback. Brooker loves to write circular dialogue. But in Bête Noire, those circles become nooses. Many lines are subtly repeated across scenes, with only a single word changed. The shift is enough to register subconsciously, but not enough to feel like parody. It simulates how real-life gaslighting works, not by replacing your memory outright, but by nudging it just enough to make you doubt yourself. Verity says, "You remember it that way." Later, "You needed to remember it that way." Later still, "You chose to remember it that way." It's a philosophical sleight of hand. The agency keeps shifting from observation to interpretation to blame. By the end, Maria isn't fighting Verity. She's fighting the moral consequences of her own perception. Brooker's signature has always been the fictional technology as moral Rorschach, and here the quantum compiler joins the ranks of the grain from the entire history of you, the cookies from White Christmas, and the algorithmic karma system in Nosedive. But Bête Noire is different in one major way. It doesn't punish the user, it rewards the rewriter. In earlier episodes, the tech reveals the protagonist's hypocrisy. But here, Verity manipulates consensus without personal collapse. She thrives. It's Maria, the character with no access to the tool, who loses everything. This reversal marks a shift in Brooker's worldview. Bête Noire doesn't just warn a technology's danger. It mourns the death of truth itself as a viable defense. And here's where things get messy. Some critics, like Emily St. James Vox, hail the episode as a masterwork of psychological trauma, Black Mirror's first true horror film disguised as office satire. She argues that Verity's manipulation is a poetic form of justice, a way to reclaim narrative from those who abused it. Others, like Charles Bermesco, The Guardian, called it a betrayal of the show's core principles. Black Mirror has always questioned power. This episode revels in it. According to this view, Bête Noire glamorizes narrative control, turning Verity into a tech-enabled sociopath whose crimes are masked by trauma chic. But perhaps the most chilling response came from a neuroscientist, Dr. Melina Soto, who published a piece in Scientific American titled, "You Are Not Your Memory." In it, she points out that the show's core mechanic is biologically plausible. With distributed ledger systems and early quantum neural bridges, we're already close to programmable memory scaffolds. What this episode shows is not fiction, it's forward compatible. Finally, there's the fourth wall rupture. Not in the episode's content, but in its release strategy. Rumors swirled online that Bête Noire had region-specific edits. That UK users saw Barneys and Americans saw Bernies. Netflix denied this. But tech-savvy fans conducted frame-by-frame comparisons and found imperceptible changes in logo texture, brightness, even background extras. Whether real or not, the suspicion itself became a mirror of the show's themes. Brooker may have engineered that paranoia deliberately. If so, it's his most wicked trick yet, making the audience gaslight themselves. Because in the end, Bête Noire isn't about who wins the war of perception. It's about the realization that once perception itself becomes a weapon, there are no winners, only narrators. To truly grasp the gravity of Bête Noire, we need to peel back the skin of the story and trace its veins to the psychological root, the historical wound, and the cultural engine that drives it. Because this isn't just a story about a woman losing control. It's a story about a system built to erase accountability, and a society that rewards the eraser. Let's start with power. In the classic revenge structure, the victim becomes strong enough to confront their abuser. But Verity doesn't just confront Maria. She rewrites the entire terrain in which confrontation could even occur. Her pendant, the quantum compiler, isn't just sci-fi jewelry. It's a stand-in for control over collective narrative. In today's world, that power looks like controlling the algorithm that decides what people see first, editing the historical record on Wikipedia, seeding a viral tweet that reframes a public figure's legacy. Verity doesn't seek justice in a legal sense. She doesn't demand apologies, reparations, or recognition. Instead, she builds a world where her version is the only version that exists. And here lies the cultural horror. In the age of infinite feeds, truth is no longer discovered. It is performed, upvoted, and iterated until consensus forms. The episode never moralizes Verity's actions. That's what makes it dangerous. Because in a culture obsessed with victimhood as identity currency, Bête Noire asks a terrifying question. What happens when the victim becomes the god of the system that once erased her? Maria's arc isn't just a descent into madness. It's the collapse of a worldview built on unexamined dominance. From the first scene, she talks over people. She assumes her version of childhood events is the correct one. Her product pitch is performatively inclusive. Miso is trending in Gen Z Asian fusion, but when challenged, she immediately invokes meritocracy. I worked for this, she snaps at Verity, as if history should come with a statute of limitations. Maria is the perfect encapsulation of the tech creative class who rode soft power to hard influence, and now feels baffled when the rules change. She is not a villain. She is not even malicious. But that's the point. Her obliviousness is systemic, not personal. And when the system turns on her, she has no tools left except denial. In this way, the episode dramatizes a cultural reckoning, the fall of the well-meaning elite who never understood how much their memory of fairness was curated by the machinery of dominance. But no system of control functions without architecture. And Bête Noire is meticulous in showing how every layer of the environment aids Verity's rise and Maria's unraveling. Take Nick, the snide coworker whose casual corrections reinforce the new truth. He's not malicious, but he's suggestible. His personality is defined by staying aligned with the dominant current. Nick doesn't fact-check. He vibes. In doing so, he becomes the embodiment of algorithmic consensus, quick to shift, always adjacent to power, never accountable. Even the HR manager, a character so minor she barely gets a name, represents the institutional facade of neutrality. When Maria complains about documentation being tampered with, HR responds with a smile and a policy reminder. It's procedural gaslighting, wrapped in corporate effect. In a brilliant touch, Verity's apartment is filled with smart mirrors. They reflect distorted versions of Maria's face as she tries to confront her. The metaphor lands hard. In a world built by systems of reflection, distortion becomes indistinguishable from design. Finally, Bête Noire tears into three myths that Western societies still cling to. That the past is fixed. It isn't. History is as editable as any line of code, and the more digital our record becomes, the more fragile our archives. That justice looks like exposure. Not here. Verity doesn't seek public accountability. She seeks private absolution through control. That memory is individual. In a connected world, memory is collective, and whoever controls the format controls the fact. The episode dares to suggest that in our rush to correct injustice, we may have created new mechanisms of unaccountability. It doesn't say this cynically. It says it with a trembling sort of awe, as if to whisper, if the victims become gods, will they do better than the ones who wronged them? By the end, we don't know if Maria deserves what's happening. But we do know this. She's lost the right to be believed. And in this world, that might be a fate worse than death. Bête Noire isn't just a story you watch. It's a story you're complicit in, and that may be its most sinister trick. Because long after the final scene fades, the real narrative begins, the one that plays out in the audience's reaction, in the message boards, subreddits, and side-channel conversations where viewers rush to assign blame or defend it. And those reactions aren't just noisy, they're diagnostic. Let's unpack what they reveal. In the days following its release, Bête Noire became one of the most polarizing Black Mirror episodes ever aired. Twitter threads turned into flame wars. TikTok think pieces collided with academic op-eds. But underneath the noise, two camps emerged. Group A sees Verity as the final form of poetic justice. They argue that Maria, as a former bully, is merely facing consequences long deferred. To them, Verity's editing of reality is symbolic, a metaphor for reclaiming agency in a world that never believed her pain. They quote the episode's most chilling line, "You didn't lose reality. You just stopped being the author." To these viewers, Verity is a corrective force, an antihero whose moral ambiguity reflects real-world power shifts, especially in post-#MeToo, trauma-conscious cultures. Group B Verity is not a survivor. She's a tyrant in empathy's clothing. They point out that her retribution is indiscriminate, affecting not only Maria, but anyone who holds onto an alternate version of events. To them, the quantum compiler isn't a metaphor, it's a warning. They cite the blank photo Maria tries to take as symbolic of a society where even evidence loses value, where truth becomes whatever the loudest voice says it is. In their eyes, Verity is a tech-enabled fascist, subtle, elegant, and therefore more dangerous than brute force. This schism isn't accidental. Brooker engineered it. By refusing to give the audience a stable moral compass, he forces us to confront our own, fragile, biased, and shaped by the same narrative manipulations we just witnessed on screen. One of the most disturbing things Bête Noire does is remove traditional gatekeepers from the equation. There's no judge, no therapist, no moral adjudicator. Instead, we see distributed responsibility, HR departments that don't question deepfake files, co-workers who align with whichever version of truth gains traction, systems that quietly update without asking. This mirrors real-world dynamics. When misinformation spreads online, there's rarely a single source to blame. Instead, it's the frictionless, passive behaviors, likes, retweets, algorithmic upvotes, that generate momentum. In Bête Noire, truth doesn't get murdered. It gets disintermediated. Even Verity isn't entirely in control. She activates the compiler, but it is society that chooses to believe her. Just like in the real world, a lie needs architecture. It needs quiet nods, shared silences, and a cultural hunger to finally believe the other version. So who's to blame? The answer, disturbingly, might be everyone and no one. There's a term in military psychology, clean kill bias, the illusion that a perfectly executed act of violence is more morally acceptable. Bête Noire replicates that logic. Verity doesn't scream, doesn't stab, doesn't destroy. She reorganizes. She recontextualizes. She lets the world do the rest. In doing so, the episode asks a question far more chilling than is this ethical. It asks, what if the most unethical acts are the ones that don't look unethical at all? In this way, it echoes real-world issues. Cancel culture as bloodless excommunication. Restorative justice narratives that bypass messy emotional reality. Corporations offering apologies while rewriting internal history behind closed doors. Bête Noire doesn't suggest Verity is wrong, but also doesn't suggest Maria deserved annihilation. That ambiguity is the final frontier. When reality itself can be curated like a brand, moral clarity becomes the first casualty. Perhaps the most haunting image in Bête Noire is not the gun, the glitch, or the golden cloak. It's Maria's silence in the final shot. Sirens blaring, lights flashing, logos shifting across the sky. And there she is, still. Smiling? Crying? We can't quite tell. She just whispers, "Do you see it too?" It's not a plea for understanding. It's a question flung at the void at us. Because by that point, it doesn't matter what she sees. What matters is whether we choose to believe her. We like to think that memory is something private, an intimate recording of our lives that no one else can touch. But Bête Noire makes it clear that belief is outdated. We're already living in a reality that behaves more like a collaborative spreadsheet than a fixed timeline. The terrifying part isn't how far we could go. It's how far we've already come. This episode doesn't offer a glimpse into the future. It holds up a mirror to the present and says, you're already in it. If Verity's quantum compiler feels extreme, it's only because it's a metaphor that makes invisible systems visible. The truth is, we've already built tools that shape what we remember, what we see, even what we believe, only they don't look like sci-fi jewelry. They look like apps, algorithms, headlines, preferences. On social media, you don't see the world, you see the version the algorithm has decided will hold your attention. Your timeline isn't a record of events. It's a mood board customized to your emotional triggers. Search engines no longer show the same results to everyone. Google tailors information based on who you are, where you are, and what you've clicked in the past. The result? We're not just having different opinions. We're starting with completely different facts. Deepfake technology, once a novelty, is now a weapon. Politicians have already been caught saying things they never said. Celebrities have been shown doing things they never did. And most people don't have the time or the willpower to check if it's real. If it looks real, it sticks. AR glasses and future wearable tech will only blur this line more. We're entering a world where you might walk down the street with a friend and literally see two different realities. Street signs, facial recognition overlays, even emotional cues will become user-controlled experiences. And on the medical frontier, there are trials underway that could literally let us rewrite our memories. PTSD treatments are being developed that use chemicals or brain stimulation to soften or reframe trauma. It's easy to imagine a future where we edit not just pain, but guilt. Not just flashbacks, but entire narratives. So what happens to society when memory becomes optional? It's not that people don't care about truth anymore. It's that they're overwhelmed. When every story has a counterstory, every video has an edited version, and every claim has a rebuttal, most people don't double down, they tune out. And into that silence steps the person who speaks with the most confidence. In today's world, emotion beats fact. Certainty beats nuance. Engagement beats accuracy. Verity doesn't win because she's right. She wins because she tells a better story. One that people want to believe. One that feels true. Maria doesn't lose because she's wrong. She loses because she doubts herself in a system that rewards certainty. We're no longer debating over what's true. We're debating over what's shareable. Verity's revenge isn't violent. It's clean. Almost elegant. She doesn't destroy Maria. She lets the world walk away from her. That makes it easy to cheer for Verity, until you realize the same technique could be used against anyone, for any reason. Bête Noire isn't just a story about a power shift. It's a warning about how the language of justice can become a smokescreen for total control. There's no jury, no judge, no forum for appeal. Maria doesn't lose because a higher power says so. She loses because enough people agree she should. And in a world governed by consensus, that's all it takes. The episode hints at 3 possible ways out, not solutions exactly, but small cracks where light can get in. First, humility. Maria falls apart not just because she's being erased, but because she refuses to consider that she could be wrong. She's so convinced of her own perspective that she becomes brittle. If truth is going to survive in this era, it might not be through strength, but through flexibility, through people willing to say, I don't know. Second, independent systems. In a blink and you'll miss it line, someone mentions storing data off-grid, beyond Verity's influence. It's a nod to decentralized networks. The future of truth might not be institutional. It might be distributed, logged in systems that can't be quietly rewritten. And third, the power of refusal. In an alternate ending that was scrapped before release, Maria is offered the chance to re-enter society by accepting Verity's version of events. She turns it down. In the final cut, her silence becomes a kind of protest. It's not loud, but in a world where everything's curated, not performing might be the most radical move of all. Bête Noire doesn't argue that Verity is evil or that Maria is innocent. It doesn't offer comfort. What it offers is clarity. We are already living in a world where reality is negotiated, where memory is mutable, where silence isn't just absence, it's a statement. And in that world, maybe the most important question isn't whether what you remember is true. Maybe it's this. Who benefits if you forget? Some episodes disappear when the credits roll. Others detonate in silence, echoing through forums, classrooms, and DMs weeks after the last frame. Bête Noire is the second kind. It doesn't go viral with a single quote. It seeps into discourse like a low-grade fever. And just like Verity's compiler, it keeps rewriting the room. The online ecosystem around Bête Noire quickly fractured into conspiracies and recreations. One particularly viral theory claimed that Netflix intentionally released multiple versions of the episode across regions. Redditors began posting screen grabs of the Barney's vs. Bernie sign, frame-by-frame color differences in Verity's outfit, even subtitle inconsistencies. None were definitively proven, but that didn't matter. The doubt itself became canon. A fan-made Chrome extension soon followed, Reality Compiler Simulator. It allowed users to toggle website logos, headlines, and usernames in real time. Satire turned functional. The extension was downloaded over 100,000 times within 3 days before being removed from the Chrome store. Its GitHub fork still circulates under encrypted names. Meanwhile, academic institutions didn't wait long. Within weeks, Bête Noire became syllabus material. At NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, it anchored a seminar on algorithmic narrative warfare. At Oxford, a cognitive science class assigned it in parallel with research on false memory implantation through digital suggestion. Professors used the episode to bridge deep fakes, political persuasion, and trauma therapy ethics. In this way, Bête Noire didn't just reflect the culture, it entered it as an operating system. To really grasp the philosophical weight of Bête Noire, it helps to view it as an ode, not a standalone story, but a portal into a web of other works that confront similar themes from different angles. Possessor, 2020, Dir Brandon Cronenberg. This disturbing psychological sci-fi explores identity possession via neural implants. Like Verity, Its characters control others from inside their memories. Its visuals are colder, its tone more nihilistic, but it asks the same essential question: is control over perception the final form of violence? The Final Cut, 2004, Dir Omar Naim. A pre-Black Mirror gem starring Robin Williams. People are implanted with Zoe chips that record their entire lives. After death, editors compile highlight reels. But who decides which memories survive? The film offers a slower, meditative complement to Bête Noire's techno-horror pace. Annihilation, 2018, Dir Alex Garland. While not about memory per se, this film's shifting landscapes and warped identity structures echo Bête Noire's sense of cognitive erosion. The shimmer in Annihilation may as well be a metaphor for Verity's compiler. It alters everything it touches and asks whether what comes out is even still you. Severance, Apple TV+. A spiritual cousin in tone and ethics. Here, workers undergo a surgery that splits their work and personal memories. The eerie corporate setting and moral ambiguity rhyme deeply with Maria's arc. When does compartmentalization stop protecting you and start erasing you? Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. Postman's warning about entertainment culture replacing rational discourse feels prophetic. Verity wins not because she's the most truthful, but because her narrative fits best into the attention economy. This book dissects that exact shift in chilling detail. The Memory Illusion by Dr. Julia Shaw. Shaw, a cognitive neuroscientist, explains how easily memory can be distorted and how confidently we believe those distortions. The book doesn't just explain what happens to Maria. It predicts her. The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. A quietly devastating novel where one man's dreams reshape reality and a psychiatrist exploits him to create utopia. But every correction creates new chaos. Le Guin's work resonates with Bête Noire's thesis: there is no version of the world untouched by desire. Ultimately, Bête Noire hits hardest not because of its tech, but because of what it reveals about us. Every time we unfollow someone for disagreeing. Every time we crop a photo to hide an uncomfortable truth. Every time we rewrite a story in our favor. We are using our own version of Verity's compiler. It's not made of quantum code. It's made of ego, pain, habit, and hope. And just like in the show, it works best when no one notices it's running. People will come to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death. Bête Noire doesn't end with a bang. It ends with a flicker, a glitch, a blink. Maria stands beneath an ever-shifting billboard, eyes wide, lips parted. We don't know if she's smiling, crying, or vanishing. And by the time the screen cuts to black, one question haunts us, not as viewers, but as participants. Did you see it too? That final line is not a plea. It's a dare. Because in Bête Noire, sight is not a sense. It's an allegiance. And what it ultimately reveals is this: we didn't lose reality because someone took it from us. We lost it because we gave it away. One headline, one edit, one like at a time. We laughed it off. We called it branding. We made it viral. We engaged. We amused ourselves to death. In 1985, cultural critic Neil Postman published Amusing Ourselves to Death, a book that argued societies are far more likely to surrender to control through pleasure than through pain. He contrasted George Orwell's 1984, a world of surveillance and state terror, with Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where truth is drowned in a sea of irrelevance and distraction. Postman feared that television had become the ultimate vessel for this soft domination, reshaping political discourse into theater, reducing complexity to sound bites, and replacing public reasoning with image-driven emotion. In essence, when information becomes entertainment, truth loses its weight. Not because it's censored, but because it's crowded out. Now, nearly 40 years later, we're no longer debating if Postman was right. We're living in the long tail of his warning. In the TikTok era, ideas are optimized for virality, not veracity. Memes outpace journalism. Narratives fracture across platforms. Truth is a toggle. Memory is a filter. The public square has become a content feed, and our collective attention is the most valuable and most manipulated resource on Earth. In this environment, Bête Noire arrives not as fiction, but as a case study. Verity's quantum compiler isn't just a metaphor for power. It's a dramatized version of the tools that already run the cultural bloodstream: algorithms, engagement metrics, edit histories, curated timelines. What she holds isn't so different from what Meta, TikTok, and Google already deploy, only with better UI. And like Postman's vision of television, her device doesn't force. It seduces. It doesn't silence. It floods. Maria doesn't lose because she's discredited. She loses because Verity's story is more emotionally efficient. It's algorithmically aligned with the collective desire to see the arrogant punished, the quiet vindicated. In a world shaped by entertainment logic, Verity is the better show. She has better aesthetics, better restraint, better pacing. Even her revenge feels designed to maximize catharsis. Postman warned us that in Huxley's vision, no big brother is required to deprive people of their autonomy, maturity, and history. They will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. And isn't that exactly what happens here? The people around Maria aren't coerced. They're bored. They're fatigued. They want the story to be done. And when Verity offers a simpler version of the truth, they take it. Not because it's correct, but because it's clean. Verity doesn't delete the past. She replaces it with a better episode. In Postman's world, television turned everything into entertainment, even the weather, even war, even the presidency. In ours, social media turns everything into content, including grief, protest, justice, and memory. Bête Noire shows how this shift collapses ethical complexity. Once Maria is cast as the problem, everything she says becomes a liability. Truth becomes a PR issue. Emotion becomes evidence. Consensus becomes court. Postman's genius was in recognizing that the danger isn't in misinformation, it's in the displacement of meaning by spectacle. And Bête Noire doubles down on this. The most powerful force in the episode isn't the compiler. It's the audience. The co-workers who choose Verity's version. The systems that update without verification. The public that doesn't ask. Verity doesn't force the world to comply. She simply gives it what it's already wired to want. Perhaps the most terrifying moment in Bête Noire isn't visual. It's emotional. It's that moment when Maria starts doubting her own memories. Not because of a threat. Not because of violence. But because no one else remembers them with her. This, too, is Postman's prophecy made flesh. When everything becomes a show, memory becomes a performance. And in a society that rewards conformity, the worst thing isn't being wrong, it's being out of sync. Bête Noire is, at its deepest level, a parable about epistemological exile. What happens when your lived reality is no longer legible to others? What happens when no one speaks your version of the world? What happens when you stop trusting yourself? One of the most unnerving side effects of Bête Noire is that it destroys the idea of a fixed past. It teaches us that in the hands of the right narrator, even history is a live feed. And that's what makes it so relevant to today's world, where protest videos are edited with different soundtracks to change public reaction. Historical figures are remixed into memes that strip them of context. Family photos are cleaned up by AI to remove undesired elements. We've built a culture that no longer archives. It updates. We don't protect the truth. We refresh it. And in that culture, the truth doesn't disappear. It simply becomes less competitive. A final provocation. What if Verity isn't the villain? What if she's just the logical conclusion of a world that gamifies narrative? She didn't build the compiler. She's just the first person willing to use it honestly. Not to tell the truth, but to win. In that sense, she's not the destroyer of truth. She's its product manager. And that's the real horror. We didn't get here because someone rewrote the rules. We got here because we asked for a better story. Shorter, smoother, simpler, something we could engage with. Bête Noire ends without resolution. Maria vanishes not with certainty, but with ambiguity. And that silence leaves space for projection, for denial, for interpretation. And perhaps that's what Black Mirror always understood better than most. That in a world of infinite mirrors, the scariest reflection is the one you choose to believe. So here's a final question for you, not as a viewer, but as a citizen of this version reality. If someone rewrote your story tomorrow, changed one name, one date, one moment, would you notice? Or would you just scroll on,